follow the chats very well.
Yes, so I
because
can read out. Okay, so I can read it out for Moitre. She says that you were talking about hybridization. When we look at these texts, minorized, marginalized, like the songs of Bono Bibi or Manik Pir in the Sundarban regions, there is a labor perspective. The songs are sung by the workers of the forest or the sea, praying to keep them safe from tigers and natural disaster. When we are dealing with the text as something that ruptures the categories and something that centers around hybridization, can the labor, class, or profession factor be one of the reading approaches as a decategorization tool that breaches the cultural or religious categorization boundary? So that's the question from Moitre.
That's a good question. Here's where anthropologists really have to do a good service for us, because they need to collect, folklorists and anthropologists collect the stories and make them available, which in fact is how many of the stories, the Bone Bibi story that I translated, for instance, came from a collection as it was sung to the author. But the Bone Bibi story, which is to protect people from tigers, ironically, does not have Bone Bibi with a tiger or ever controlling a tiger, which is a conundrum. If you stop and think about it, how is that possible? But she does sort of conquer, I guess you would use the word for Dokin Rai, who in the Bone Bibi story is actually a shapeshifter and turns himself into a tiger. In the Rai Mungo, he doesn't do that, but rather he rides tigers and he has an army of tigers. The Anu Jalai, who has, of course, worked on the Sundarban and the Bone Bibi cycle, was pointing out to me some time ago when we were sitting in Dhaka that many of the people who sing the Bone Bibi story and actually go out, the workers who go out to collect the honey, are becoming and adjusting their actions to conform to a standard, what you might even call orthodox Vaishnava perspective. They become vegetarian. They follow all of the rituals and so forth for pollution and the like. And you end up with a transformation, and it's not called a conversion. It's just simply they've started doing, and guess what comes along with that? There's an elevation in social rank and so forth. So my emphasis on not who you are, but rather what you do, ends up really coming to the fore here, because they are, by doing these things, they are making themselves into a different community. And I think the fluidity of this is actually what many of these stories from the Sundarban are really about. The Gaji Pir story, the Rai Mongol, a lot of the Chateau Pir material, Badar Pir, Manik Pir. It's not so much to establish, I am this or I am that, but rather give me ways of coping with the world. And again, that's a very different issue from a religious question. So it doesn't have to be, I practice Islam, although Bone Bibi does, because she's a Pirani. But at the same time, it's not her identity as much as it is what she does. And the followers follow suit. I think they do today much the same thing. I've got pictures. Anu Jalai has shared with me photographs of the pujas, and they call it a puja, that's done with Dokin Rai, Borakan Gaji, Bone Bibi, Shahjangali, Badar Pir, Manik Pir, Shitala, and Ola Bibi, all lined up together, each with images, with a puja being conducted by people who are clearly Musulman in their orientation. Their actions are Musulmani. and by Hindus, Hinduani perspectives. So I think in this sense, the fluidity is really something that category formation doesn't like, because it breaks down those barriers. And as I said, this all started back in the 90s when I said, how do we talk about Hindus and Muslims if without using those terms, without establishing that divide? And it's taken a long time to find ways to get around that, to make it palatable, shall we say. I hope that answers at least part of the question.
Yeah, so amazing answers. I mean, this is exactly what it is that you kept on talking about this flexibility, the fluidity, the malleability, which you have mentioned in your text,
Mhm.
that how borders and boundaries were exchanged and interchanged. I mean, the crossovers through translation. The translations were made possible because that was allowed to be made possible, and that is how you make these stories to come into reality. So it's fascinating. So this is the new reading strategy and the new storytelling that we need to populate the public space more with to counter.
Mm.
I mean, the more stories like this, more I mean, more to do in the academia with these stories, in
Mm.
seminars, in classrooms, in our research practices, and perhaps that is how we can rebuild and can
Yeah.
reintroduce these stories, right? So
Well,
this,
at least to become aware of the
right,
power of
right,
the way we read.
absolutely, absolutely, and it's also true for the Sahajiya tradition as well, the bowls and
Mhm.
poetry. I mean, I mean, I always think that Bangla poetry is very strong, and it is very much animated by this tradition, which has been obscured, right? I mean, I mean, whether you call it syncretism or interfaith dialogue or cross-cultural dialogue or translation, equivalence, I mean, in
Mhm.
whichever we say, but then this has been possible. This has animated Bangla literary practices for centuries because that was the practice, and I think. You talked about Fatemar Suratnama, and you said that there are mines of archives that are still unused. So that
Yeah.
is where I think you can help us, Tony. That I mean, we are really keen to engage with these
Mhm.
unutilized, unknown, unaddressed manuscripts and archives. I mean, you mentioned
Mhm.
about the Dhaka University Fatemar Suratnama and other texts. And you said that we, in the field of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, also that there are many texts which are still not perhaps, kind of engaged in a scholarly manner, so that they can be introduced
Yeah,
for the market. Yes,
there's hundreds, literally hundreds.
right. So we can learn from you more, maybe later, about other texts that we can also think of translating. Yeah. So that would, yeah. Is this a new text?
There's
Yeah.
where you start, right there.
Okay. Okay. That's
This
great.
is Jitendra Mohan's
Asiatics,
fabulous. Yeah,
Asiatic
this is
Society.
the Catalogus of Bengali
Okay,
manuscripts. It's
okay,
not complete.
okay.
There have been additional catalogs published since then, but it is. And if you haven't looked at it,
Uh-huh.
you can see there is an incredible amount of information
Right.
that is provided. And
Mm-hmm.
you look up, just reading through the titles of texts
Mm-hmm.
opens you to a completely different world. And you suddenly realize how expansive
Right.
this literature is.
And the
Can
archive,
I double back to something you were saying about the bowels?
yeah,
The bowels,
yeah,
the
yes.
bowels are often called syncretists and so forth.
Mm.
I want to go back to my position that when a word gets brought into Bangla, say from Persian, that it gets, the semantic field is not exactly the same. When a Baul takes a word from the Vaishnavas or from the Sufi or from some other place, and they use it, they revalorize it, they give it a new meaning, or at least some of the old meaning is still alluded to, but they actually use it differently.
Mm.
So if you read it like that, then it's not syncretic, because syncretism says that they're trying to import something that's alien to their own way of looking at the world. But in fact, what they're doing is they're changing it to their way of looking at the world.
More
And
creative and
there's
subjunctive, as you said, more creative and
yeah,
subjunctive.
exactly. And there's a young man, and I'm embarrassed here, here's where the chemo brain takes over sometimes. It gives you a difficulty recalling certain things. But there's a young man who's doing a dissertation in Germany on just this issue with the bubbles, and I'll send you the
Sure,
name, so you should probably be in contact with him.
sure, I'd love to. Okay.